Thank you, Ron.
Sir.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
How are we doing this evening? I want to start off by asking you a question. Do you know who this is?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Prince, one of the greatest guitar players of all time. Did you know that Prince passed away intestate? Does anybody here know what intestate means? Why, he passed away without a will or a trust. I'm going to read something to you here regarding his estate so that you know exactly what happened with his estate when he passed away. So just so you know, his estate was worth multiple, it was I think $600 million. So his estate paid roughly $80 million in federal estate taxes, $24 million in state taxes, state estate taxes. He lived in Minnesota, by the way. The estate also owed $97 million due to the complexity of the estate. The IRS also charged a tax bill of $31 million. Legal and court fees were $30 million. The IRS assessed them a $64 million penalty. The executor fee, Comerica Bank and Trust, some of you might have heard of them, they received $30 million for its work. Prince had 6 half-siblings who were his beneficiaries of the estate. Now, because Prince didn't have anything in place, the federal government and the state of Minnesota put their fingers on his assets. That's why having a properly funded and created living trust is very important. I'm going to go ahead and talk to you about tonight about the difference between a trust and a will and what the difference is and why it's important to have one. Now, before I get started, let me tell you a little bit about who we are, the financial architects. As Ron stated here previously, Ron, Jen, and I, we're all managing partners of the financial architects. As you can tell, we have several offices. Our headquarters is in Chino Hills, California, and we're rapidly expanding. You could see we have our website here, and we have information regarding our company. It's in the binder or the folder that was provided to you. Now, what is estate planning? Has everybody here heard of probate and what probate is? Mm-hmm. Yes? So, you know that with probate, if you pass away intestate, your estate goes directly into probate. Okay? What that means is that now the state, while you live in California, the state of California will now take over your estate and they will assess a tax to your heirs. Just so you know, in California, the kicker, the threshold is $184,500. So for example, how many of you here are homeowners? If you're a homeowner and your home is worth over $184,500, chances are you may go through probate. Well, not you, your estate. What happens is if it goes through probate, right, the estate, your heirs have to file a petition for probate. Okay? The court then, if you have, I'm gonna go back and forth. Give me one second here. So, for example, let's say you have a will, okay? Did you know that your will, when you pass away, your will has to be filed with your petition for probate? And that will actually make the probate process easier for the state that you reside in. Do you know why? Because in your will, you have an executor listed who is going to be managing your estate, but also you have your beneficiaries that are listed on there. So that makes it easier for the state to know exactly who it is they're going to ask for those probate taxes. Guess what happens if those probate taxes aren't paid by the time the state gives them that deadline? What happens to your property, your home, let's say? Yeah, well, see, the state doesn't want your home. You know what they want? They want the money. So what happens is your home gets sold at an auction. I know this firsthand because I've purchased 4 of my properties through probate sales. It was unfortunate, but the gentleman, my first probate purchase was in 1996, in the city of Glendora. The gentleman passed away, and the probate sale started at $15,000. I was there. I was there trying to purchase the home. I ended up purchasing my home for $179,000. Okay, people think, well, George, if the probate tax was $15,000 and you purchased it for $179,000, that difference, it goes to my heirs. It goes to my children or whoever it is that is going to be receiving my assets. Yes, but no. Do you know why? The state of California, or the state that you reside in, hires an attorney, and they also hire a CPA, right, to basically manage the entire process. Between them, they charge $1,000 an hour, okay? The fastest that I've seen a probate case settle was 18 months. The longest, 3 years. Do you think that after 18 months or 3 years, them charging $1,000 combined an hour, there's going to be any money left over? No, I've only known 2 people in my career that have received money. A good friend of mine, when his father passed away, received, I believe, $2,600 or $2,800, and then another one of my clients, she received approximately $1,600. To me, I worked too hard and too long to allow the state to take my assets and not allow them to pass to my children. I'm just not for that. Now, back here to estate planning. So there are different types of estate plans. Of course, you have the revocable trust, irrevocable, and I'll get into those shortly. But when we create a living trust for you, not only do you have your declaration, you also have your certification, right? We have a power of attorney for your health care and for your finances. And then we also we ask you to designate beneficiaries. We also ask you to list an executor and an alternate executor. Now, before we get further, who knows the answer to this? What came first, the chicken or the egg? Anybody? Nobody? Nobody? Well, I don't know. I don't know either. That's why I thought I'd ask you. Okay, so with your healthcare directive, I don't know if you're aware, but if you do not have a healthcare directive and you become incapacitated and you can no longer make decisions for yourself, either the person who's going to not be caring for you, they have to file for something that's called a conservatorship. Does everybody know what a conservatorship is? Okay, a conservatorship is a court order where the state appoints somebody to care for you, for your health care and for your finances. If one is not created, guess who is in charge of your health care and your finances? Yes, the state is. You don't want that. Okay, with your health care directive, you get to state exactly what your wishes are. I'll give you a quick example for me. One of my biggest fears is, what if I am now incapacitated and cannot make any decisions regarding my health care? My biggest fear is, what if my wife predeceases me? What I don't want to be is, I don't want to be a liability to my children. What if my children are now married and they have their children, and now, because I've seen it within my family, aunts and uncles and cousins arguing, hey, well, I took care of mom last week and now it's your turn. I don't want my kids to have those problems. I don't want them to inherit that. So in my healthcare directive, it states, for example, that if the doctor tells my wife or my eldest son that I am now incapacitated and I have a terminal illness, it is clearly stated that I do not want to be intubated. No life support, no food, no water, no nothing. The only thing that I did state that I do want and I'm comfortable with is I would like medication so that I don't feel any pain or anxiety. A lot of people, when they know they're near death, they start having anxiety and panic attacks. I had a cousin who had brain cancer, okay? And in the last few months of her life, she started having severe panic attacks. That's when my aunt would go ahead and just push that little red button, and my cousin would instantly just fall asleep. Number 2, it states on there, I don't want to be buried. I want to be cremated, and I want my ashes spread specifically in 2 locations. It also states that if I pass and my organs are good, then they can go ahead and they can donate them. But see, you're making the decision. You're not leaving that decision to somebody else. When I was doing the healthcare directive for my father says, well, you decide. And I said, no, Dad, I don't want to make that decision. What if now you're incapacitated and we don't know if you're terminal or not? I don't want to be the person who decides, well, let's connect my dad or let's disconnect my dad. I don't want that pressure. I don't want that responsibility. I really, really don't. So you're taking the weight of the world off of your heirs' shoulders by you making all the decisions. God forbid me now, I'm end of life. All my executor or my agent has to do is make a copy of that healthcare directive and hand it over to the nurse or the doctor, and they see what my wishes are. And that's that. You also have a financial power of attorney. If you're unable to make any decisions regarding your finances, then you list somebody who will make those decisions for you. Let's say Mrs. Smith here, that Mr. Smith is incapacitated, and let's say he's receiving a pension, and let's say 1, 2, maybe even 3 months go by, right? And the pension is not deposited into his account. For you to contact them to get information, they're going to ask you if you have some sort of court order or if you have a power of attorney to speak on his behalf. Once you have one done, you can just scan it, email it, and send it over to the pension company, and then you provide them with proof that you are who you are. Then they'll go ahead and say, okay, Mrs. Smith, how can we help you? Hey, well, we haven't received a pension, hasn't been deposited in 1, 2, 3 months. What's the deal? Then they'll go ahead and they'll talk to you. Otherwise, again, you'd have to revert back to getting that conservatorship. This right here will go ahead and help you save thousands of dollars instead of getting a conservatorship made. This is just a flow chart of how non-probate assets and probate assets go. And then here's just another flow chart of how it is. It passes, of course, everything always goes. You live in California. California is a community property state. Everybody here knows what that means, yes? No, so basically what that means is what's yours is his and what's his is yours. Okay? So if something happens to either of you, the other spouse inherits everything. Okay, then from the spouses, it goes to your children, grandchildren, so on and so forth. Now, I'm going to go back to this again. Your last will and testament. Now, with your last will and testament, again, it's better to have that than nothing, but a last will and testament, one of the cons is that it is public record and that it does have to go through the probate process in order for your heirs to receive their inheritance, whatever that may be. For me, the bigger thing that sticks out also is public record. I don't want my last will and testament, my information, to be posted out there for everybody to see. A living trust does not get recorded. It is private. We take care of notifying the state and the county that you reside in with paperwork that we prepare for you, informing them and notifying them that you now have a revocable living trust. Again, revocable is the trust that's most utilized, but then we do have an irrevocable trust. Now, irrevocable trust, just so you know, we take the assets out of your name and we place them into somebody else's name. Some people are not comfortable with that. There is a purpose for having an irrevocable trust, but yeah, assets cannot be moved out unless you get permission from the person who now takes possession of your estate. But again, there is a use for them, there's purpose for them, but the most, the one that's used mostly is the revocable trust. Now, I want to tell you something. A lot of people will tell me, well, George, I don't think I need a trust. Why do you think you don't need a trust? Well, what I'm going to do, George, is I'm just going to add my children's names to my granddeeds to the properties. Okay, I'm going to add my children's names to my bank accounts. I'm going to add them to this, that, and the other. Hey, great. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. But you have to know that you are opening yourself up a can of worms there. So I'm going to tell you a quick story. I had a client, 3 properties, business, lots of money. He told me, George, I don't need a trust. Because what I'm going to do is I have 3 children, and I'm going to add each one of my children's name to the title of my of my properties, each property. Those are the properties we want them to inherit. And I said, are you sure you want to do that? Yes, George. I'm also going to go ahead and add them to the LLC. I'm going to add them to my bank accounts. I'm going to add them to this, that, and the other. Okay. Good luck. 2 years later, I get a phone call. And it was that gentleman, George, I'm in trouble and I need your help. What happened? One of his sons had a little bit too much to drink, was involved in a motor vehicle accident and killed 2 people. Okay? They sued him. He was underinsured. He did not have enough coverage. So what did they do? They did an asset sweep. And what came up? That property. But because he was also on that bank account and he was also on the LLC, that's what opened up the can of worms and allowed that the plaintiff's attorney to come after all of the assets. It was at that point in time when this gentleman asked me, what can I do now? And I told him, nothing. It's too late. If we can turn back the clock, it'd be a different story, but as of now, it's too late. Earlier, I had mentioned to you that the first property that I purchased here in the city of Glendora that I still reside in, I purchased that in a probate sale. I purchased that home in October of 1996. A couple of weeks before, or I was either a week before or a week after Thanksgiving, we're starting to, decorate for Christmas in the front yard, when this lady comes up and she was carrying a box. And she said, excuse me, are you the homeowner? And I said, well, yes, I am. And I asked her, may I help you? And she said, well, this was my dad's house. This was the house that I grew up in. My dad always hung these lights up. And I was wondering if you can do it for me just one time. And I'll be honest, I didn't want to. Those were the ugly, do you remember the ugly big old bulbs from back in the day? And I said, and then my wife says, come on, we have to do this. So we hung it, and she got her, back then it was flip phone still. She got her flip phone and started recording it, and then she thanked me. And she said, George, it's unfortunate, but I have 4 other siblings, and between the 5 of us, we couldn't raise the $15,000 to get my dad's house out of probate. And she says, I see you have young children, and I'm glad the house went to somebody like yourself, but we wanted to keep this house because this was our childhood home. And I just told her, hey, I'm sorry. Fast forward 15 years later, I get another knock on the door. This time, there's a firefighter standing outside of my front door. And I open the door and he says, excuse me, sir, are you the homeowner? And I said, well, yes, I am. And he says, I don't know if you recall, but about 15 years ago, a lady came and she brought you a box and it had Christmas lights. And I said, yes, I remember her. She says, this is the house she grew up in. Her father was the homeowner. He said, yes, my mom is on her deathbed. And she's wondering if she can walk in. I'm not going into your bedrooms or the restrooms, but she's just asking if it's okay if she walks through and I film what the house looks like, including the backyard. And I'm gonna FaceTime her. I think that's what it's called, right? FaceTime. So he was walking through and she was like, oh my goodness, oh, they changed this, they changed that, this, that, and the other. And after we were done, he told me that to that day, she regretted that they weren't able to save, between her and his 4 uncles and aunts, weren't able to save that $15,000 to get the house out of probate. Again, the state doesn't want your house. What the state will do is they'll put it up for sale at an auction to the highest bidder. It took me 8 years to convince my dad to get a trust done. My dad came to this country when he was a young man and started acquiring property. When I would first talk to him about it, he would always tell me, well, you know what? I think you and your mom want to take the properties from under me already. I'm not stupid. I think you guys want me dead already. I think you guys this, that, and the other. So I left it alone. Unfortunately, what took for my dad to change his mind was his best friend and his best friend's wife passing in a car accident, and he saw what happened. So his friend Kenny and his wife, they had 3 properties, they had bank accounts, they had 3 minor children. They passed away on the 15th coming back from Vegas. The first thing that happened was social services came and took those 3 kids and they were separated. They were each put in a different foster home. The second thing that happened was the state froze all of their assets. When they did that, those kids started receiving the Social Security benefit from their parents. But once you turn 18, there's no more benefit. It took that and for my dad to see those houses get sold at probate, for him to tell me, okay, now I understand why it is you've been telling me what you've been telling me. Let's go ahead and let's get this done. Now, with that said, if you have a will, a trust, a healthcare directive, power of attorney, when was the last time you had it updated? You may not need any updates, but it's always good to look it over. We recommend annually, but worst case scenario, at least every 3 years. You might have another child. Maybe now you have grandchildren. You know, maybe it's your intention to make sure your grandchildren are taken care of with your estate or through your estate. You know, if you do have a living trust, is your trust properly funded? Because if it's not properly funded, then you know what? You may have to end up going through the whole court process anyway.
What does that mean?
Funded, so in order for your assets to be protected, they have to be placed in the trust. Because the trust basically acts as a safe, and that's the only way the state can put their sticky fingers on your assets.
And that's if you record the will.
Yeah, you have to record. You don't have to record. You don't have to record the will. You just have to make sure. For example, if it's a property, what we do is we prepare a cover sheet, the preliminary change of ownership report, and the grant deed. The grant deed will not be under the name of your trust, and that way the county and the state know that now that asset is protected by your living trust. Same thing with bank accounts. You know, qualified accounts such as your retirement, like pensions, 401ks, things of those nature, don't go through the probate process. But when we create a trust for you, I do create a schedule where we list the name of the plan, the account number, and then when we deliver it to you, in the beginning, there's an accordion file where you list all of your statements. That way, God forbid something happens to you, your executor is not looking around your home for certain documents. Everything is kept there. So in the trust, they have the name of the account, the type of account, and the account number. But then when you put a statement in there, now they have the phone number to call in order for them to go ahead and liquidate those assets and receive them and distribute them as you have stated in your trust.
And what about taxes?
Taxes on
The trust on the property.
On the property?
You still, when you transfer to the kids or whoever the beneficiary
Well,
does it get recalculated by the county?
It depends. Now, it depends. So I'll give you my example. Let's just say I'm leaving my house to my children. The house will be received by my children through the trust as the parent-child transfer, no reassessment. Property taxes still have, property taxes still have to be paid, of course.
But there's no adjustment.
No adjustment made. No, it will not be because anything through a parent-child transfer, there's no reassessment. Okay. If you do have a trust, do you know how it works? And again, are your beneficiaries up to date? Again, you know, you may have another child, or maybe now you have grandchildren that you want to include in your estate plan. If that's the case, then we recommend you go ahead and you have that reviewed. We have no problem reviewing it for you. It's at no cost, at no fee. That's it for me tonight. Now, next, I have the honor of presenting a very good friend of mine. I've known Jen now for over 20 years. You know, when I left the law firm where I was working at, actually when I was laid off, and I came over to do financial services, Jen was actually the person who took me out on the field to teach me financial services. With that said, I am in business with her and her partner, Ron, and Miss Jennifer Ramos, please, a warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, George. That was awesome. You guys got some value from George? Thank you. You know, out of a handful of people in business, George is one of the people who I trust completely. And that goes a long way. There aren't too many people that we could trust in business, but George is definitely one of them. So you'd be lucky to actually work with him. My job tonight is to share with you how or what you leave and how that impacts your heirs. Now, we're going to talk about estate taxes, if you actually your estate will owe one, the 3 types of money that you will leave behind, and a little bit of legacy planning, okay? So, estate tax. Did you know that the majority of the population probably will not owe an estate tax? Today, it's probably a 0.2% of the population, because the federal exemption for estate tax is 13.61 million per person. That means that if all of your assets combined don't equal or are not above 13.61 million, your estate will not owe any tax. You guys know that, right? So again, the majority of the population will not owe any. Now, if you do or will, you could gift your assets, to your heirs. And every year you could gift $18,000 per person. Combined as a couple, as a married couple, it'd be $36,000 per person. And the lifetime gifting limit is the same as the estate tax. So it's 13.61 million per person. Now, there is something that changed, but let's go over it. So if your estate, all of your real estate, all of your investments combined is 8 million, then you don't owe any taxes, right? You haven't even hit that 13.61 million. There's a tax law that's about to sunset. It's called the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It will sunset or end by 2025. So that means 2026, we're going to have new tax laws. We don't know what they will be. We don't know what the new administration will do, right, with taxes. Now, it's estimated that when that happens in 2026, the federal exemption will be $7 million, potentially. So if your assets combined are above 7 million, then you will owe some estate tax. So let's say it's 8 million, right? That means there's this $1 million that would owe estate tax, and in between 18 to 40%. If your estate is 8 million and the exemption is 7 million, that $1 million will be taxed. That's what your heirs would owe to the IRS, $345,000. Where's the money coming from to pay for this? They have to maybe sell one of your properties, something maybe from your investments, right? Now, these are the 3 types of money that you would leave behind to your heirs. It would be qualified monies, pre-tax monies that you guys are very familiar with. There's 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, 457s, deferred comps. These are tax qualified accounts, which means if you have these accounts, you owe a tax debt to the IRS. No taxes have been paid yet on these accounts. When you start drawing money from these accounts, what are the taxes you pay?
I think they will hold 20% at least. No?
Ordinary income tax. Whatever your income tax rate is, that's what you're paying, right? Now, I had this couple who attended one of our seminars. Not a estate planning, it was actually a retirement planning seminar. They came to my office and they were so mad. Well, not at me, thank God, but they were so mad. They were telling me the story that for 30 years, they had a financial planner. And they were saving monies in their retirement accounts, right here. 401ks, 403bs. They were trying to max it out as much as they could. And the wife was telling me that, I remember some of those years, we were raising the kids. It was really hard to save money, but we did it. They were proud of themselves for being able to do it. When they retired, however, they had 2 pensions, 1 each. They didn't need this money to live on, right? Can they leave it there forever? There's something called required minimum distributions by a certain age. At 73 years old, they had to start taking money out of their accounts.
Because they gotta pay taxes.
Because you have to pay taxes on it. They owed a tax debt. And when they started pulling that money out of these accounts, they put themselves in a higher tax bracket. Nobody told them about that there were other options, So the other options are after tax or non-qualified. You got your stock portfolio or your mutual funds, right? You got the tax-free side, Roth IRA, if you're familiar with that, and then life insurance as well. What happens here when you pass away? When your kids, here's what I know. There are people born, 76 million people were born between 1946 to 1964. They're called the baby boomers. You guys know this? Did you know, I wasn't asking to raise your hand, but thank you. Did you know that baby boomers are a big problem to the US economy?
Yeah, because we're all retiring.
Yes. Never before in our country's history have we had all these people retiring at the same time. In 2024 alone, it's 11,200 people every day turning the age of 65. That's 4.1 million people in 2024. And it'll keep going until 2027. You know what they call this? The silver tsunami. And this has a very big impact to the US economy. Why? Because the government has to figure out a way to keep paying the Social Security to all these people. And how about Medicare, right? So they're trying to figure out how can we tax people so we could pay for, all the baby boomers. What happens, again, when you pass away? And these assets right here go to your kids. I know you're not spending it. I meet with you. You guys aren't even spending your money. $84 trillion in assets is what the baby boomer generation has total. It's the largest in our country's history. You guys aren't spending it. What happens when this passes to your kids? How are they taxed? Regular income tax, right? It's fully taxable again. So I'm going to give you an example. Something that was kind of cool. What is your name?
Linda.
Linda. Let's say I'm your daughter, Linda. Okay? Now, Linda was able to accumulate $1 million in her tax deferred accounts, in her IRA, right? Let's say Linda passes away and never used the money. And I'm her only daughter, and I inherit the $1 million. Thank you, Linda. I inherit the $1 million. Let's say I don't need that money, and I want it to keep growing and growing and growing, right? I don't have to pull that money out until I reach my RMD age, which it would be 75 years old. Okay? So that money's growing. But let's say I pass away before 75. Now my son, who you met, Jaden, he left already, he inherits the multiple millions now. He doesn't have to start pulling that money out until his RMD age of 75. It can literally keep going in our family for generations, right? It's a beautiful thing. It's been happening this way. Something happened during COVID. There's a law that was passed that kind of snuck in there during COVID. Have you guys heard of this? The Secure Act. Once I tell you about it, you're not going to feel secure. So when the Secure Act passed during COVID, I can no longer wait to start pulling that money out until I'm 75 years old. When I inherit your money, I have 10 years to deplete that account. Why? They figured out a way for the taxes to be paid quicker. That's what the Secure Act did. It has a very big impact to your inheritance. So no more stretch IRAs. It's 10 years, it has to be depleted. Now, one of my clients, he came to me and he was saying, Jen, I don't know what to do. My kids they're adults, they're both doctors. And when they inherit this money, all this money I saved in my 401k, and I don't need that money because I have a pension, again, this pension, when they receive this money and when I die, they will be at the highest tax bracket in their careers. And I will be putting them at the next highest tax bracket because now they're inheriting this money and they have 10 years to deplete it. This is going to be a problem for your children, potentially, right? Let's talk about the after-tax monies, your stock portfolio, your mutual funds. When you sell a stock, how are you taxed? Capital gains taxes. And if you've had that stock for over 1 year, it's long-term capital gains. That means it's 0%, 15%, or 20% in taxes you would pay. In order to get to the 20%, your income that year would have to be over $583,000. Most people don't get there, right? How about when your kids inherit? How do they pay the tax? What is there tax for your kids? You would say probably, right? Actually, this is a good news. There's something called step-up basis. Okay? So for example, Cindy, I'm picking on you. Cindy, let's say that you got the stock tip back in 2013 for XYZ company, and it's $100 a share. She decides to buy the stock. Thank you. She decides to buy the stock, 1,000 of it. So she spends $100,000 for the stock, right? So she lets it grow, and the stock does well. By the time 2017 hits, it's $400 a share, and she passes. Now, you're too young, but let's say I'm your adult child. I inherit $400,000 worth of this stock now. Do I pay taxes if I sell it? No, because of the step-up basis. Now my cost basis becomes $400,000. So when I sell it, and let's say I sell it at $400,000, I pay no tax on it. This is the same for your homes, right? Your kids inherit your home, you bought it for $100,000, and now it's worth $900,000. They inherit it at $900,000. Now their cost basis is $900,000. They don't pay any tax if they sell that property. Okay, step up basis. Next, how about the tax-free side? You guys familiar with Roth IRAs? Okay, so Roth IRAs are popular because it's tax-free. You take in money from your checking account, you've already been taxed on that money. You invest in a Roth IRA, it gets invested in mutual funds, and it's not taxed as it grows. And when you pull the money out, it's tax-free. So you can literally have tax-free retirement if you have Roth IRAs, right? The challenge or the limits with a Roth is if you are over 50 years old, the maximum you could put away is $8,000 per year per person. If you're a married couple, then combined, it's $16,000 per year. Now, yeah, per year. So also there are some limits to income. If you make over $161,000 as a single person, you don't even qualify to put money in the Roth. If combined income, married couple, over $240,000, you don't qualify to put money in the Roth. So what do we do? How do we get there? There's something called, remember that client I was telling you about, this frantically, trying to figure out how to move his money from here to here? You could do it. Roth IRA conversions. Roth IRA conversions. How that works is, with a Roth IRA conversion, those limits that I just shared with you don't apply. You can literally move chunks of money every year to a Roth IRA from your IRA. Yes, you have to pay taxes on the money. You would be taking advantage of the tax sale right now. Yes, taxes are on sale. Historically speaking, taxes are actually low. So you would pay the taxes now instead of your kids, right? You would move it every year, whatever that amount that you want to move every year. Let's say this person has $100,000 in an IRA, and they're going to take $20,000 per year and move it in the Roth IRA. So by the time 5 years ends, they've moved all $100,000 to the Roth IRA. Yes, they pay the taxes every year on that money. But now, starting in 5 years, and they start pulling money out of it, it's tax-free. When their kids inherit, it's tax-free.
You can pull that up like a 403B?
Correct.
And into that? Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, any tax-qualified account, tax-deferred account, okay? Now, remember this, $345,000 in estate tax? Now, there is a way that your estate can actually take care of this without your kids having to sell your asset. One way, and it's one of the foundations of estate planning, is through life insurance. And life insurance can take care of that estate tax, can take care of any other fees and expenses that your state would incur. It also can take care of the taxes if they inherit your tax qualified accounts. That's a possibility, right? So it's an opportunity for your kids or your heirs not to have to sell anything because you have life insurance. I'm going to show you an example. So this lady right here, Emily, she's 62 years old. She gets something called an indexed universal life. In the life insurance world, there are two main types. There's term, which is temporary coverage, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever that is. Most term policies never pay out a death benefit. You know why? People outlive them. And then when you try to renew it, when the term is over, it's too expensive to keep. So that's term. It's there. Now, on the other side is permanent. In permanent life insurance, there are multiple types. Maybe you guys have heard of whole life or universal life. Permanent life insurance has a savings component, right? In whole life and universal life, that savings component gets a guaranteed interest rate, 2%, 3%, 4%, whatever it is. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there's something called variable universal life. Your savings, part of it is directly invested in the stock market. So it's going to go up and down in the stock market. And then the one in the middle is something called indexed universal life. So an indexed universal life, you know, most of the people I meet with when they're talking about saving money, they want the opportunity to grow their money, right, as much as it can. But they not necessarily take that big risk that it could drop. And some people, you know, say, oh, I want the guarantee, you know, maybe 2, 3, 4%. But isn't that also a risk because you're not maybe beating inflation? People ask me, is there a way to get both? So that's the one in the middle, the indexed universal life. Let me show you how it works. If you had money in the stock market, this is the gray line, the S&P 500 index. If you put money, 100 grand in 1999 in the stock market, that's the height of the dot-com boom, you would have seen your money drop by 2002 to 65,000. I know you guys saw this in your 401ks. Of course, the market goes back up again. And in 2007, what boom was that? The real estate boom, right? Your money would be at 113,000 in 2007. But what happened to that boom? It burst. By 2008, your money's at 74,000. That's the stock market. You saw it happen with your accounts. If you had your money in an indexed account, the green line, the same 100,000, when the market dropped to 65,000, you are locked in at 100,000. You don't lose. When the market goes back up again, so does your money. Maybe not 20%, but it's still going up, right? There's a cap on the growth. And then at the height of the real estate boom, you're at 136,000. And when it dropped to 74,000, you're still at 136. You never lose money in an indexed account. Okay? So she gets an indexed universal life or an IUL. I'm going to call this the secret to investing. Why? It's tax-free. When she dies, it's a tax-free death benefit to her heirs, right? Now, even while she's alive, she has access to the savings portion of it, tax-free. There's also living benefits, meaning while you're alive, you could actually also take advantage of it. If you got a chronic illness, for example, you lose 2 of the 6 activities of normal living. That means you can't feed yourself, you can't walk, you can't bathe yourself. You lose 2 of the 6. That's a chronic illness. This pays out a monthly benefit tax-free. So let's say she gets this. She gets a $250,000 policy. Now, some of the money or a lot of the money in her retirement accounts, she doesn't really need it. So she takes $20,000 per year and puts it into this policy. In a 14-year period, she's put in $280,000. And you're thinking, that's a lot of money in a life insurance policy, right? Well, what happens to this money that she never needed anyway? She got this policy, and she just lets it grow. If she dies at 75, over $600,000 goes to her heirs, tax-free. If she dies at 82, over $700,000 goes to her heirs, tax-free. If she dies at 100, over $1.5 million to her heirs, tax-free. So I share a lot of these ideas with you because I think a lot of financial planners today don't, especially on the insurance side. It's one of the ways to get tax-free monies for you and for your heirs. Like Ron mentioned earlier, you know, the estate planning, the living trust and the wills, the financial planning, the tax planning, all of this stuff go together. I think that's what makes us different. I gotta impress upon you about our company. I know George just said a little bit about us, but when you meet with somebody from TFA or the financial architects, we don't just look at one thing because we know everything makes a difference. They all work together. But even if you just get one thing from us, it didn't mean we didn't look at everything and give you advice. That advice that we give is complimentary, by the way. When you meet with us, it's complimentary. Of course, doing a living trust is not complimentary, but anything else is complimentary. We don't charge any financial analysis fee, consultation fee, management fee, or all these different fees. We believe that if we do the right thing for you guys and you're really happy with it, you're gonna refer us to as many people as you can, and that's how we've grown as a company. So hopefully you got some value today. I want to introduce back Ron, who is not only my business partner in our office here in Rancho Cucamonga, but also my partner in life. Please help me back. Welcome back, Ron Brown.